Hello, everybody. Welcome to this next one in our PSDI webinar series. So I'm Nicola Knight, so I'm the PSDI coordinator. And today we are going to be hearing from Stavrina Demosthenos and Ben Jefferson from the Henry Royce Institute about sample tracking with Ampletracks. So that we can jump straight in, I will stop my screen share and I will hand over to you, Stavrina.
Thank you. As Nicola introduced me, I'm Sabrina. I'm a data curator at the Henry Royce Institute for Advanced Materials. I lead the data aspect at Royce and the data curation team, and this involves data curation and interaction with our Materials 4.0 activities. And today I'm joined by Ben Jefferson, who is the BAFTA CTO. Yes, it's those BAFTAs. And he is also the lead Ampletracks developer that's helping us develop this. I think it's a wonderful app. The way this presentation is going to go, I will be delivering most of the presentation, and Ben will filling in the gaps as and when required. All right, I'll just start. So today, I'll be starting off talking about the Ampletracks philosophy, and this involves both how we develop Ampletracks, how Ampletracks features end up being how they are, and also how we work together. I'm gonna talk to you a bit about why we chose Ampletracks and why we choose to continue developing Ampletracks. And then what is Ampletracks? I will discuss Ampletracks bare bones, just the technology behind it. And then we'll go into a live demonstration on what we call the demo instance of Ampletracks. So I'm going to switch the window briefly. And we will close with some future plans and some questions from the audience and some links. So onto the philosophy. So from the beginning, and this was before I was involved in Ampletracks, we decided that the perfect should not be the enemy of the good. This is both when it comes to developing Ampletracks and how Ampletracks behave. So how this instantiates is one can store as much metadata, so this is data about data, as they wish, as quickly and easily as possible. We also want to be flexible. We want to be flexible in how we work with each other, in the project lifecycle, and usable. So this comes across in how you manage the metadata fields. So you don't have to get the exact perfect metadata structure initially, because you can go back in and add more fields. This also comes across in the record creation and editing, and this is at the user level. So the user can edit the record as and when they please. So if they don't have all of the metadata they need, they have to submit for their physical sample at that moment, they can go back and edit the record. Ampletracks will actually shout at you when that happens, but that isn't that much of an issue because it will still save the data that you input within its backend. And we want to be very easy for the user to pick up and start working. So also, this is both, so we're also open source and shared, and this is both because the Henry Royce Institute has a responsibility to the taxpayer, but it's also how we want to develop Ampletracks. And this is because free software means more users, but it also means more people developing features for Ampletracks. And this is also in how we interact with some institutions or groups of users that might need features that require payment. So when you are requesting an Ampletracks feature, what we request back is that you allow us to make it open source. And this all translates into our philosophy of Ampletracks. We're not perfect, we're flexible, we iterate, and we try to share our work and provide support to the growing user base. But that means that if the user base wants something paid for, then they have to also fulfill our responsibility to the taxpayer. So a very, very brief history. So Ampletracks existed before Royce, and it existed in different iteration before we absorbed it into the grant and started providing support for it. So Royce decided to introduce a data indexing platform for Royce researchers, and within our Royce community, we found that we already had a good tool to build on, and that came from the Midas grant. The tool was being built within the Midas grant, and the Midas grant did provide the initial conception and monetary support for Ampletracks to be created. So Midas grant was developing Ampletracks for sample tracking originally, but also as a way of collaborating across different institutions and countries. And following the establishment of the data curation team at Royce, the data curation team assumed the responsibility of leading the development of Ampletracks. And with that out of the way, this brings us to sample tracking. So sample tracking is at the core of Ampletracks. It was originally conceived for sample tracking, and this is what features this talk will focus on today. But before we move on to the demonstration, I want to give a brief overview of the technology that Ampletracks is built on. So it is a web front-end to configurable database. That database is a MySQL database. It's a MariaDB database. It was built specifically and originally for sample tracking. And inheritance is at the core of Ampletracks, because often we have one parent sample, and from a metallurgical perspective, from the perspective of metallurgists, that sample is then chopped up into lots of child samples. A way in which you could sort of abstract it and then contextualize it within chemistry is that you might be decanting something when it comes to working with powder materials. You have a big jug of powder that you're then sectioning off into little other, a bunch of other, a bunch of other little jugs. And another core feature of Ampletracks are relationships. So we spoke about inheritance, and that is an intrinsic relationship. A parent is intrinsically linked to a child, or rather a child is intrinsically linked to a parent. However, we want to link different record types that contain metadata about different physical objects or even digital objects. So Ampletracks introduces relationships, which are extrinsic relationships that we visualize in graph view. So what does Ampletracks do? I always tell the people that I demonstrate Ampletracks to, I'm introducing Ampletracks to, that it works with you to physically and digitally track samples. And it's important to say that it works with you. Ampletracks won't work automatically. Ampletracks won't work unless you implemented it in your workflow. So a good feature that we have for implementing it into laboratory to digital data analysis workflows, we have a QR code label function to associate physical samples with records. And we've built a lot on this. I think it's one of the core features that makes Ampletracks so usable for lab to digital data processing workflows. We have records, that's a built-in Ampletracks feature type, and those records contain parent and child relationships that you can build. These are intrinsic. So if you create a child from a parent, they will be intrinsically linked. You can also create record-to-record semantic relationships between different record types. These are what we call extrinsic relationships. We've implemented GraphView to visualize these relationships, and you can switch from intrinsic to extrinsic relationships and back within GraphView. And here's a little GIF recording that I made of one of the samples contained within Ampletracks. One of the PhD researchers that I work with has kindly agreed for me to present this. So I'm going to let it go. And we will see this later, but this is one of the most extensive uses of child-parent relationships that we have in one of our production instances of Ampletracks. And it demonstrates how interesting it is to inspect how your metadata and your records are linked together. I'm going to now move on with the presentation. So I keep talking about metadata. In that metadata, we've implemented 14 data field types, and we're expanding. Then this is for creating modular and customizable record types. A record type is a form that you fill in with the appropriate metadata. And this includes chemical formulae, a chemical formula record type with a built-in alloy atomic percent to weight percent converter, and chemical formula. And Ampletracks is fully web and mobile web browser usable because we want users to be able to go in a lab, provided it's not a clean room, provided it's a lab that you can take things in and out of, and be able to use their phones, use Ampletracks on their phones, or portable devices. And another feature of Ampletracks that comes into the whole lab management, project management, research management is permissions. So each user can be assigned one or more roles within Ampletracks. We have the inbuilt role that is superuser. Each role is a bundle of permissions. So you can control how these permissions affect what the user can see and cannot. Each permission says for a given entity what they're allowed to do. So create, read, update, or delete records, not exclusive to records, that could also create, update, or delete users, and how wide-ranging the permission is. So do they have permission to only their own records? Do they have permission to the records underneath a project? Or do they have global permissions? Global permissions are close to superuser permissions, but it really depends on what type of Ampletracks built-in feature you're looking at. And to facilitate per project level permissions, each record is assigned to a single project. Projects are built into Ampletracks, and each user is assigned to one or more projects. Right. So under the hood, Ampletracks, I don't want to call it simple, but it is quite simple. It's a context-agnostic front end to a relational database. A record type is equivalent to a table on the SQL backend. A form data field is equivalent to a column. And the user-defined front end instantiates relationships on the backend. Now I'm going to move on to demo.ampletracks.com. I'm going to show you how to fill in details if you'd like an instance on demand created. An instance on demand copies our demo instance and gives you a week's access to your own instance of Ampletracks to be able to play around with, create your own records, play with data fields, and really explore the massive space of Ampletracks. And then we'll move into Ampletracks demo as a user. I'm going to look at the Ampletracks UI briefly. We're going to look at record creation, QR code generation within record, child record creation, QR code association, record association via relationships, So those are the extrinsic relationships. Graph view inspection briefly. And then I'll show you what it looks like, what Ampletracks looks like to the super user. So the person determining what the record types look like, what permissions each user can have, and what the roles look like. So we're going to update a record type within Ampletracks. So we're going to add extra data fields to the record type. We're going to import the record type from the suggested pre-builds that we have in our GitHub repository. We're going to create semantic relationships between record types. We're going to update permissions. We're going to assign permissions to a new user role. And then we're going to come back and talk about future plans. So I am going to move to Ampletracks Insist on Demand. And when you go to the link, I'm going to have that QR code persist later. What you do is you type in your details. So my details are Sabrina, my last name. I'm going to give them my email, and then I'm going to submit a password that would like this instance set up, and it sets up an instance for you that is a copy of demo.ampletracks.com, which might also contain some test records that we've put in during demonstrations, such as the one today. And the demo instance will persist for a week, after which it will be deleted. Ben has been very kind in setting this up for me. And if you're going to the link already, please note that it is two front slashes. Let's move on to the demonstration part. So now I'm going to log in as a user. That is a user role that I created. So I log in, this is the UI. So what can I see here? As a user, I can navigate to records. I can fiddle with my account settings, and I can also scan a label within Ampletracks itself. I can also switch between record types. So say I want to inspect the analysis tools that other users have submitted. I can go here, and here I can see, I can go to the analysis tool record type, and I can see what has been submitted. And I can also switch to equipment. Here we have a few different things and a few fake pieces of equipment that we use for testing. But something that you might see here is that the UI, the font size is quite big. So what you can do as a user, you can go within your account settings, and you can change the font scale factor. And for me, I like a 75% font scale factor. It ends up being too small. I can zoom in again. I save and close it, and I have to log in and log out and log back in. But it does make the UI look a bit more comfortable to the eye. Personally, for me, this is the point where I'll ask you if you'd like me to return to the previous UI scale, just for ease of display during the demonstration. All right, so let's inspect this record that already exists within the sample record type listing. So I have a record here. And I already have a few data fields filled in. So I have a label. This is associated with a QR code. I have the name of the sample. We've just named it steel alloy. Here's the composition of a steel. And here's a few things that we chose to include for this demonstration. So within the record, I can create a child record, or I can clone this record. So I can create a new parent record that is an exact clone of this record. So for ease of use, I'm going to do this now. Okay. I wasn't expecting this. Sorry about that. Oh, okay. So it's created two clones for me. I think because I tried reloading, so it sent the request again. Something to log for the way these records are disassociated is that these clone records don't have these extrinsic relationships. They also have a different ID in the backend. So I'm going to go in here and edit this record. So steel alloy, I can name this steel alloy for PSDI demo. I can remove some of the micro additions within this alloy. And within this little, within this record type, sorry, within this data field, I can add new elements as micro additions. So I can press the plus button. It brings up a periodic table where I can choose what other additions I could have within the steel. So I'm going to put in cobalt, and I'm going to put it in weight percent, and this is up to 1. So in this case, I'm going to do a 0.7. It reduces the biggest number. So iron here, so this is a steel, iron will be the element with the highest percentage. So sorry, this is a bit long, so you've not been able to see it, but the more I increase other elements, the more it reduces iron. And if you're a steel scientist, it's also in line with, we didn't build this specifically for the steels, but it's also in line with how we quote iron composition. So I've now closed the periodic table. And here I've got my library. So within my library, I can save this exact formula as under a name for me, and it saves it within its like machine precision, or at least close to machine precision formula, or I can give this a name. So steel PSDI demo. I'm not very creative. It saves it, and this is saved at user level. So no one else can see this. We're working on building this feature so that it's available to users at the project level as well, and at the global level as well. So it creates a little sub database within the data field type. I can provide some sample processing details. So sample was annealed at please don't ask me if this is correct. I'm not a steel scientist, and I don't know if actually this would work. Yeah, this seems a bit high. Let's say 400 degrees C. I'm going to save and close this record. And now I have a record, steel alloy for PSDI demo, that is different from the record I cloned it from. However, it does retain some information here. I can also go in this record and edit who to contact if this record is found. So I can say, oh, who's responsible for the sample? I can say it's Joe blogs. And I can also say J blogs at inst.ac.uk. Also, as a user, I can save the default value for this question for my records. So if I save and close this and open up a new sample record, if I scroll down, it has already populated the fields with the default value of my choice. I'm going to go back now because I want to show you how to create a child sample. And for that, what I will be doing is, oh, sorry, there was a Q&A. No, it is not, but I will, actually, I'm not sure if I don't think it is, but that is a good feature.
I think that's something that would fit quite nicely with the functionality we're building to make that composition library shareable. So at the moment, the only interaction with the composition library is through that single drop down. But and that's, as Sabrina said, that's sort of user specific, but we're looking at building a page similar to the one you've got on the screen here, where you'll get a full listing of all the compositions from all users, providing you've got permissions to see them. And at that point, that's where I would imagine that the searchability would come in exactly the same way as you see it on this screen at the top of the columns. You've got those fields there, those are filter fields. So that's where you'd then be able to search for those compositions. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
So now I want to create a child for this record. There's two ways of doing so. I can go within the record and I can click on plus new child record, or within the records listing, I can hover on the cog and click on add child. So it's now created a child and it's populated a lot of the fields that have been inherited. Some fields are inherited because logically they are, but some fields shouldn't be. The way I set this up, so I could name this a steel alloy child. Sorry, I should also say inheritance is something that you can configure within the creation. Interesting. Oh, this is, sorry, by the way, this isn't something that we were expecting. It's populated this with the name of the record. So is the name of the formula. So if I change the formula to this, it seems to do the trick, but wasn't expecting this. Sorry about that. You can say this sample was sectioned from the master sample received from our collaborator. And now I'm going to save and close this record. So one thing I did before this presentation was create a QR code to assign an Ampletracks QR code to assign to a record. And usually the way this would work is that you would scan the QR code either on your PC or your phone, and it would redirect you to a page. The way we're going to do it today, I disencoded or de-encoded my QR code. So I've scanned my QR code, and there's two ways of doing this. So I can either associate a label with a record and create the record on the fly. So I can choose to create one of these record types, or I can get a list of all the records I've recently accessed with a timestamp. And it's telling me records without a label, which records don't have a label, which records have an existing label. And then I can choose which record to associate this QR code with. I'm going to choose the child I just created and click and associate. Now, I'm going to save and close this record just so that everything's saved. But let's view the record and let's view the graph. So you can see that the steel alloy parent is related to the steel alloy child. But if I double click this, it's showing me all of the extrinsic relationships. We can see here this child doesn't have extrinsic relationships. I'm going to double click it and go back to intrinsic relationships. I'm going to navigate to steel alloy, and steel alloy has a bunch of extrinsic relationships. So the steel alloy was imaged using this piece of equipment, and we can also see what other records this piece of equipment imaged. And actually, some of these records we shouldn't be able to see because, and you can see here, it says you do not have permission to view this record because they are not part of they're not part of the permissions that this particular user that I've created has access to. But let's create a data set so that I can show you an extrinsic relationship. So I've got my steel alloy. And I'm going to switch to the dataset record. And I've very, very quickly found a micrograph that can associate this from Do-It Pumps. Yeah, this isn't the exact micrograph that that is associated with a steel. It's just something that I found on Do-It Pumps. So let me look at the technique. SEM. So I can say the technique is SEM, scanning, will be SEM. The material is steel, or I can leave it empty because I'm going to link it to my record. And actually, I can link it now. I can say it was produced from record write sample. I can type in the name of the, oh, what did I name this user? Oh, right. I'm going to create this record, but we're going to come back later for association. Sorry about that. You can give the contact name and do it once. Contact email at institution.ac.uk. And I can also choose a preview image to upload to the file. I created one on my desktop. I downloaded it to my desktop rather. Save and close this. Oh. Yeah. User. All right. Now I'm going to move on to the superuser UI view and permissions so that you can see what you can affect from the back end of the front end. Call it that, the halfway. So as a super user, I log in. I'd already set my UI to be scaled at 75 or 70%. So you can already see I've got access to two new areas. So this is schema and admin. Within admin, I can create new projects, but also see how many records are associated with each project. I can also see all the record types that are contained within demo.ampletracks.com. So I don't know if you've noticed this, but sample is not something that is visible to the user that I was logged in as earlier. Sample PSDI demo is. If I navigate to user roles, you can see that I've got a user role, I've got a project administrator user role, I've got a viewer, and I've got a PSDI demo records access. So let's inspect the user role permissions. You go into edit mode, you can edit the name, but here you can see that a user has access to create a record, edit their own record, delete their own record sample, view at the project level other users' sample records, and list global sample records. For equipment, they can create equipment. The way I visualize it, they can only view and list globally, but not edit or delete, because in my opinion, maybe you disagree, maybe the way you configure Ampletracks will be different. This is something that should be reserved to the Ampletracks instance manager. They can create their own data set, similar permissions to sample. but that it cannot delete the data set. And analysis tool has similar permissions to equipment. A project administrator, the way we've structured it here, has access to a few different and a bit more permissive permissions. As you can see, a project administrator can create users within their project, edit their details, view them, list them, but they can't delete them. Again, this is, for me, if I was setting this up, this is a fail-safe. The user that we saw earlier had PSDI demo records access. So let's see how that's different. So they have access to equipment, a data set, analysis tool, but they have, unlike the basic user, they can only view this sample record and not the other. But what if I wanted to give this user access to the sample record type? I can view what I want to give them access to. I can select samples, and I can say they can view samples at the global level, so they can list them in the list table that we're looking at earlier. So I'm going to add that. They can create samples. They can edit their own samples. They can view only at the project level. And again, they won't be able to delete. So I can save and close this. And now I've given the user that we're going back to later more permission. Within here, I can also change the data fields within record types. So actually, it's important for me to know when I receive the sample. So within this record type, I can inspect the data fields, and I can add a data field. As I said, we have 14 different data field types, and for this one, I'm going to choose date. And I can choose its position, and its position will be here. And I can say date received. For JSON export, I would name this something in snake case like sample date receipt or received. And this is something you only see in export. This is something that you see in list view if you choose to include this data field in list view. And within the form view, I can say, when was this sample received? I can also say, oh, I want this to default to today. And because the project didn't start until, say, August 2023, I don't want them to save any dates before August 2023. I can also choose inheritance. I'm going to say I don't want anyone to inherit this, or I can say this is something that when you create a child, you cannot change. And I can save and close this. And then I can choose to include it in list view. Let me navigate back. So now I want to create a relationship between equipment, between a data set and sample PSDI demo. So I can choose data set as one of my pair, and I can choose sample PSDI demo as the other of the pair. So we can see the arrows indicating the relationship direction. So we can say that a data set record can be related up to, I would say, maybe 1 if I'm being strict, or 10 sample PSDI demo records. And one sample PSDI demo record can be related to, say, up to 100 data sets. And semantically, the way I would link this, and this might not be the most meaningful way I could say this, but a data set was produced from the sample, and the sample was analyzed to produce. I'm going to save and close this. Another way of creating a record type is by importing an XML formatted, XML specified file. And we do have some of these in our GitHub repository. For people that are just setting up their own instance of Ampletracks. They're within the example file folder. There's a little README that helps you import your first record type and helps you add relationships. The record types are contained in here. This also means that if you're quite savvy with XML, you could create your own record type before you set up your Ampletracks instance, and you can create record types programmatically. So now I'm going to go back into my user view to see what's changed for the user and to create an extrinsic relationship between the steel alloy child we created and the steel alloy and the data set. So I'm back here before I created this data set record. So now within the data set or within the record, I'm going to do it within the data set. I can add a relationship. So it was produced from sample PSDI demo. I'm going to do the neat little SQL trick because I actually forgot what we named it. It's related to steel alloy. And I'm going to save and close this. So we'll go back here. Oh, I didn't name this. Sorry about that. Steel micrograph. I'm going to save this and it saved the name. So I can inspect my record dataset recording graph view. Look at this, and if I double click it, I can see it was produced from steel alloy, and steel alloy was imaged using the T-scan Mirror 3 SEM, which is one of our bespoke pieces of equipment.
I thought I floating behavior. Sorry, Stephanie.
Sorry, yeah. That's okay.
Quite elegant though, isn't it? Quite beautiful.
Yeah. I'll stop moving it around. So we have something. Okay. So now one final thing is that as a user, I can only create QR codes for my own records, and I do lock down how users can create QR codes. QR codes being labels for records. I would create a QR code for a physical object rather than a digital object, which a dataset would be. So unless maybe I wanted someone to find my record and I was sharing it with them in some format that didn't allow for linking. Within this record, I can edit this and I can say, oh, I want to create a new label because actually this label got destroyed. So you can associate multiple labels with a record. I can choose the formatting in which to print our labels. So here we have this 3x9. It's related to paper that you can print on. It's a sticker paper that the company called Avery creates. This is the one that we tend to use less frequently, and you can also print them really, really tiny because someone requested QR codes small enough to be cut down and put on AFM samples. And I can download this as a PNG, which creates one label. I can download labels as a sheet. And I can also download a test sheet, which you can't see. This is actually creating the QR code that I just associated with the record. So now I'm going to close this. I do have the label assigned. I'm also going to remove this label on the fly, just so you can see how easy it is to remove it. And also possibly why we need to lock down some of the editing. I'm going to save and close this. And I'm going to go back to the presentation and the demo here and take some questions with Ben. Let me just go back to where I was. I'm going to stop sharing briefly.
Yeah, so I'm actually currently just answering the outstanding question that we've got about DOI. So we have spec'd out the work to do this. So the system doesn't do it right now, but we're literally, it's like the next feature on our list. So we've been working with DataSite to use their API to mint DOIs directly from within Ampletracks. So that would allow the administrator to tick a box on the record type to specify whether they wanted all records of this type to have a DOI automatically, or there'd be an on-demand option there as well. So you'd be able to say, I want the option to have DOIs for these records or records of this type, but it would be up to the user to then click a button when they actually wanted one. So that feature is in development.
So something that I wanted to show everyone, and we're not going to give access to everyone because this is our area where we test and we create new tickets. But how we develop Ampletracks is in part through Ampletracks. So we use Ampletracks as a bug log and an area where we can input new ideas. So we're now in the process of moving from a different project management. We can call Ampletracks a project management platform, from a project management platform to Ampletracks. So we're moving all of our tickets to Ampletracks itself. So now I'm going to go back to the presentation actually, just because I want to finish off with some new features that we're developing. So one new feature, as was spoiled, was the DataSite integration.
Right.
So we want, sorry? No, that's fine. Like, you're answering questions on the fly. It's perfectly reasonable. So we want to integrate our API with the DataSite API and give a way of relating the schemas we create on Ampletracks for records to the DataSite schema. We're developing a REST API to do that. We want to also output our QR codes as G-code. This is for laser etching if you want something to be persistent on an object. We want to build a portfolio of application area case studies. So this is the context when I was talking about how Ampletracks is context agnostic. We want to look at ways in which users have been contextualizing Ampletracks. One way in which we've been contextualizing Ampletracks is we're tracking Ampletracks development within our dev instance. And now I'm going to invite you to scan this QR code to see the public view of a demo record from, I think it's from Federica Blogs. If you'd like to come to a hands-on, more practical demonstration of Ampletracks, scan the QR code here to navigate to the Eventbrite website from which to register from, and it's all online. We also have a in-person practical demonstration at the Royce Hub Manchester, at the University of Manchester, in May, but we understand that not a lot of people can make it to Manchester on a specified date. We do have some time for questions, and thank you to Ben for fielding the questions as I was presenting.
Yes, so if anyone's, if I've failed to give a comprehensive answer, then do pipe up again and let me know that. Just quickly, Stavina, if you could bring up the demo and show the label printing. Can you just show?
Yeah, I can show it. I can show label printing as the admin.
Yeah.
Sorry, as the super user.
Just to demonstrate what it looks like when we generate a whole page labels, because that's the sort of principal workflow that we'd imagined, is that people would generally be printing labels off ahead of creating records. So you'd have a whole page of sample of labels that were unassociated, that were sort of virgin labels. You'd print those off in bulk first, and then as you generate a sample, you would stick an existing label to it, and then by scanning that label, the system knows it's not associated with anything, so you would get the UI, the page that Stavina showed earlier, where it says, oh, this is an unassociated label, what do you want to do with it?
Yeah, so I thought it would be faster for the demo if I just grabbed the encoded link rather than showing the QR code. But yeah, so as a super user, I can go into my admin tab. I can choose generate labels. And before I print out those labels, they're not generated. They're generated when I download the labels. Again, as a failsafe, so that I don't create IDs that are never, that are, I don't want to say dead on arrival, but yes, IDs that are dead on, database IDs dead on arrival. But I have a few different ways of doing this. So I can print a whole sheet of labels in whatever format I have built into Ampletracks. I can print a single label. And within records, I can, let me create a label for this one. I can generate a new label. And if I know what my sheet is, and also what areas of my sheet I've not used yet. So if I'm printing on a blank sheet, I can choose to print here, here, and here. So instead of just printing labels in one go, and this is also at the user level, instead of printing 27 labels in one go, in this case, I can print one label and I can reuse my sheet within the printer. Is that what you wanted me to show, Ben?
Yes, yeah, no, perfect, thank you. We've got a question about that. Does this link to any other laboratory software? I'm not quite clear whether the this in the question refers to the QR codes we were just looking at. Just to stress that those QR codes are totally valid URLs. Anyone can scan those with any device. So it resolves to a HTTP URL. You could scan it with your phone. A member of the public, if they pick up your sample in the street, God forbid it ended up there, they could scan that and it would show them the public view of that record. So any fields that you had specifically said were to be publicly visible would be available to anyone just scanning that with their phone. They don't need any software, they don't need a login. But to stress, obviously, that all of the fields that are not publicly visible would in no way be revealed to a member of the public scanning it. So that just means you can designate some fields as being those which are sort of publicly accessible.
So do you mean laboratory software like LIMS, so laboratory information management software, and not necessarily LIMS, that particular piece of LIMS software? So at the moment, no, but we hope that with, so we hope that by building our REST API, we can start seeing how we can build for other pieces of software to plug into. But this is more on a need basis. So at the moment, we do have one electronic lab notebook that I'm testing with a team of technical professionals here in Sheffield. When I say testing, as in we're testing it at the user level. However, I'm not going to mention it because that would be free advertisement. And not because I don't want to give them free advertisements, it's because it might not be the most appropriate one for you, and I don't want to recommend something that.
Very quickly, Stavina, could you also show the JSON export? Just to, whilst the REST API doesn't exist yet, we're working on that. We do still right now have that have a JSON export.
Yeah, I was going to say I have suggested to people that wanted to export data from Ampletracks to basically add all of the fields in list view. So if all fields are in list view, they can JSON export. I'll answer this. So within the record or specification, so when you're configuring the record type, you can say this field is immutable. So no one can change this. If you are not someone that has permission to change the inheritance within the record, or you can just, I think as the record creator, you can have people view it and extrinsically relate samples to it, but not necessarily be able to edit it. So it locks down the record to a specific.
I think that question might also ask, potentially, unless I've misread it, also, can you give them a list of options they could choose from? So like where with your date, you said they couldn't select before and after. Could you have like a predefined standardized list?
Yeah, so actually, if Ben doesn't mind, I'm going to go into Ampletracks dev, and this is the last question we'll take. I can go into Ampletracks dev. In Ampletracks dev, say I want to create a new ticket. We did just have a so this is a predefined list, and this is a list where you can choose multiple things, and this is a list where you can only choose one thing. So one field. We also have drop-down menus, and we have dual list pickers that you can't see within this record, unfortunately. But drop-down menus look a bit like this. And within records, you can add conditionals. So certain fields will only show up if a condition is met in a different field. That is something we didn't show today either, but that is something that is already built into Ampletracks.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So I think, so all of the questions have been answered. So I just wanted to say thank you very much to Stavina and Ben for presenting this. And just as a quick thing as a follow-up, so if you're interested in finding out more about what PSDI is doing and has on, we also have some more events and webinars coming up. So check out the events page on our website. And you can also find us on all of the social media sites. But just, yes, thank you very much to Stavina and Ben for an excellent presentation. And thank you all for coming and watching this webinar. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.